Welcome to the bold analysis. Rigathi Gachagua convened a special meeting with Matian'gi in Maryland, US, before holding a joint diaspora session with Kenyans living in the Maryland. And Rigathi Gachagua team took a photo and shared the photo in public. Insiders are talking about the said meeting because Matian'gi actually arrived earlier and had to wait for some time before Rigathi Gachagua joined. The meeting was convened with representatives with of course, allies, handlers from both sides of Matian'gi and Musalia Mudavadi and Rigathi Gachagua. Matian'gi is actually having a campaign, a diaspora campaign team in the US. And Rigathi is also having a campaign diaspora team in the US. So it is the two camps that work together. And while the photo is taken of the two, but report is the meeting that lasted for more than 2 hours actually saw the two campaign sides sharing notes about what is to be done. In politics, it is people don't just bump on each other. And with Rigathi Gachagua, this is something that was in the offing. So I'm going to explain more about this video just to check what was inside this meeting. Kindly subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell and like our videos. And thank you very much for supporting our podcast. We do this each and every day because of your support. And thank you for supporting this. Without much ado, I want us to look at the post by Rigathi. In Baltimore, Maryland, accompanied by my spouse, Dr. Dorswas and Dr. Fred Matian'gi, I held a productive engagement with Kenyan teachers, healthcare providers, and community workers who live and work in the USA. They are as much concerned as we are on the draconian decisions being made towards defunding Kenya's education sector, as well as the motionless university funding model by the current regime. Education is one of the most essential foundations that every nation must take seriously. Unfortunately, in our nation, recklessness and ineptness are driving this sector into bottomless pit. This left unchecked will destroy generations to come. Nobody should be left free to decide to shake the very foundation of our nation and the legacy we live on. What then shall we be left of our country if this is allowed? Thank you, teachers, for your solidarity and being good ambassadors of our nation, Kenya. And you can look at, of course, if you look at the photos of the meeting, it was a well coordinated meeting. You can see the two sides, the attendance of people, of course, fellows who attended it. And in this other photo, in this other frame, Matian'gi addressing the event, of course, a joint session with Rigathi. Remember, in this session, it is not reported of some ethnic groupings like Rigathi is meeting Gikuyu or Abagusi or something like what we had seen in Seattle, where he had met a Kikuyu team and again a group of Abagusi. I think we saw that in Seattle and Boston. So, of course, you would understand how that can be. And this is the photo of the meeting between the two leaders that were there. So I would, and of course, I just want you to look at this frame is Rigathi with, is Rigathi Gachagua's wife, Dorcas Rigathi, with CS Matian'gi. Okay, it is not a coincidence for those leaders to meet. I normally tell you that people don't just meet it is not a coincidence of this Baltimore meeting. And I want us to look at what is there. Remember, there is a context to this. According to insiders, Rigathi meeting was not a coincidence, since Rigathi and the team had planned to be there, and the photos were shared. Of course, there was an option of this meeting being done without us knowing, without even us getting the information that actually the leaders met. Matian'gi and the Rigathi delegation were all present in the meeting. And there is some very interesting context to this meeting. The healthcare workers who met Rigathi and Matian'gi were part of the team that met Musalia Mudavadi on Monday, earlier this week. Musalia Mudavadi was in the US on Monday and met a clique of some healthcare workers working there. And part of that team is the team that met Rigathi. Another context is the report of Kalonzo getting out, and Kalonzo is also making his way to the US. Of course, earlier on Wednesday, he was in the UK where he held an interview with the British English Service. I will want you to get a snippet of that here.
After the last general election in 2022, the country has basically been very, very unstable because of police brutality.
Well, a lot of the protesters, and we've had many of them on this programme, say they don't believe that the people who run the country care much about their lives, their career prospects or lack of them, as they would regard them, about the rising cost of living, and they don't believe their voices are listened to. I mean, do you think they are right? Are they being ignored by the political elite in Kenya?
By and large, they are ignored. But now recently we hear former Prime Minister Raila Odinga suggesting what he calls intergenerational dialogue, and a lot of Kenyans are very skeptical about that. In 2023, I was privileged to chair a national dialogue with the members of the other side of government, and we had serious 6 months deliberations. We came up with recommendations on how to handle, among other things, the high cost of living, and of course also digging in for democracy. But the administration will not listen. So right now, young Kenyans are indeed right in feeling very skeptical, and not just young Kenyans, every Kenyan, particularly those who have pay slips, and many of them feel that the taxation regime has been overwhelming. People cannot put food on the table, and so that is generally the mood in the country.
And so, as a member of the opposition and as somebody who wants to become president, what would you do about it?
Well, one of the things we have done as opposition, and we are united opposition, is to come up with a commission. We're calling a Restorative Justice Commission, which is led by a former Attorney General and a former Speaker of the National Assembly. And we want to be able to look at those historical injustices, particularly the killings by the police. We are talking about in excess of 140 young Kenyans who have been killed, who have been felled by police bullets since last year, and a lot of them injured. And the administration had promised that they would look into these matters, particularly be able to pay some compensation to the families of the bereaved. But nothing of that has happened. And so, as opposition, we are very clear on the way forward. The first thing is to make sure that there's justice for all, strict adherence with the Constitution and the rule of law. Now, apparently, this current administration does not seem to care at all.
Yes, so this was, Kalonzo is also out of the country, and the reports that he's also supposed to join this team to in the US, of course, for more session. The opposition politicians are trooping to the Europe. And of course, observers are pointing to a diplomatic shift that probably the global powers that were catalysts of Ruto presidency in 2027 could be shifting alliance and warming up to opposition. However, I need to put it this way. I think 2022 general election, we must not forget this. There is not so much to celebrate in this trend of opposition politicians trooping to the US. Of course, we saw in 2022, the Azimio team complained of foreign infiltration in our elections. And I remember the ambassadors, Meg Whitman, were there, the other one who was from the British ambassador, the other British ambassador was here. They were really blamed to have been the axis of election infiltration in Kenya, hugely blamed. And world over, too much of global interest into elections in African countries has never gone well. Has never gone well, and it's not really not pro-democracy, but pro-interest. No one would actually want a president born who has just been manufactured to us by the West. Now, what was the objective of the meeting in Baltimore? And what exactly is happening? Remember, even as we talk, the two camps, both Matian'gi and Rigathi Gachagua, have been campaigning, leading different fronts of campaign in the US. So that would have been, of course, a culmination of two fronts working together. And being that part of the opposition, it will be interesting to see what happens the next few days, because Matian'gi is a front runner, same with Kalonzo and Rigathi Gachagua, even though Rigathi Gachagua does not qualify to run for presidency if the impeachment is upheld. Now, what is at stake here? I think this meeting affirms Rigathi relationship with Matian'gi, and this was good for the optics because at the moment, actually Matian'gi Rigathi attended an interview, of course, when making a statement in the US, he actually said that he was the front runner for the opposition, even though willingness to support the Matian'gi, any other person that would be picked if they decide so. So they took that, and I think that is affirming Matian'gi's grip, affirming Rigathi Gachagua's grip to support Matian'gi. So the other second observation I can make from this trip here is, from this meeting, is the Rigathi Gachagua's mission in the US, both with Matian'gi, there is some convergence. And if you allow me bring Rigathi, Kalonzo Musyoka, there is a strong political convergence of the mission in the US. In fact, I have seen the political operatives around Rigathi Gachagua, his allies. You'll give credit to its due. I think they've really tried to sustain the momentum. They've been running their rallies as normal. They were in Nakuru. They've been to Kajiado. Today, I think I saw them in Embu. And they're trying to sustain the momentum, even as the other characters, even as the other leaders who are supposed to be part of this are quiet. And if there is something that you can largely see here, is whether it is some joint funding for the next election, or whether it is strategy meeting on what to do and to say next, but something, there is a convergence of a political mission there. Of course, you understand Matian'gi is believed to be Uhuru Badi, and yes, is being seen largely as Uhuru's hand person in the opposition. But I think this also indicates that these negotiations extensively do not have limitations. It is because Matian'gi could actually be lobbying for Rigathi Gachagua to support him. Let me say this. Whether we like it or not, Rigathi, with all his shortfalls that no human being is perfect, with all the other challenges that we can raise against Rigathi Gachagua, but there is one thing you cannot do. anyone who wants to remove Ruto from power, whether you approach it from the data viewpoint, or you, of course, numbers viewpoint, or you approach it from political acrimony, or you approach it from the campaign perspective, the campaign machinery, you cannot do away with Rigathi Gachagua. And in direct, this is what I'm saying. Kalonzo, Rigathi, Kalonzo, Matian'gi, and the others cannot shake Ruto without Rigathi. And that opposition, the strongest bit of it is Rigathi Gachagua. But as they now meet in the US, I want to believe there are a lot of strategy meetings that are going on. One thing that should actually happen is when they come back, actually, they should not show signs of being undecided. I think there should be a smoke from the US. When they arrive, let the support base know who is the front runner, who is the candidate. Otherwise, there is going to be the lobbying for division within that opposition camp is going to break it. The lobbying that is going on there for it to break together is going to break it. Ladies and gentlemen, that is my take. Let's meet in the next. Thank you.